Hey there, Icarus here, and welcome to another edition of What the Heck. This time asking what the heck is Moonchild? Depending on what circles of the internet you travel in these days, this may be a complete blindside to you, or something that you've been kind of curious about. This little smug-looking green alien occasionally popping up on your feed, sometimes accompanied by the most banging tunes you've heard this side of the 90s. I'll freely admit, at first, I thought this whole Moonchild thing was a forced meme. I mean, just look at him. It feels like the kind of thing someone draws up in MS Paint and then convinces a lot of people to repost without context. But here, the lack of context deepened the mystery until I finally landed on the source, which was that yes, Moonchild is in fact a real game released for Windows back in 1997 and traces back even further to the Amiga, where a older version of this was slated to release but never really got out the gates. But what really captured everyone's attention was the theme tune.
It's Moonchild, oh, you got the power to be his friend. It's Moonchild, oh.
It's the beginning of a new and excitingly different story.
It's Moonchild, you got the power to be his friend.
I'm not entirely sure what the composer, Ramon Braumuller, was on at the time, but boy was he cooking. This was the theme tune that accompanied that abandoned Amiga version, and happily is an alternative tune you can enable in the menu here. But for people experiencing this vanilla, there's a alternate version. Now, unfortunately, this lacks the inspirational lyrics of you having the power to be his friend, and for that, I do feel like it suffers. But still, I think we can all agree that, on balance, this still remains an absolute banger. But yes, I feel like a lot of the bafflement over the Moonchild revival here stems from this unusual pairing of visual and sound, because if we get down to brass tacks, Moonchild doesn't look like a game that should sound like this. It's a sentiment that certainly extends beyond the title tracks, because as you load into the likes of World 1, you're presented with this blissed out rhythmic electronica that just washes over you and just settles you into an almost trance-like state as you navigate the levels. Happily, Moonchild doesn't stay at this baseline throughout the entirety of its run. As you move through the levels and you experience more of the threat that ails this world, the soundtrack kicks up in aggressiveness, topping out in the fourth world with just this absolute assault of a soundtrack. It's even more insane when you consider that this audio is paired with these visuals, and to unlock it you already have to go through the pain of acquiring 77 gems. You can acquire 7 gems per level in each world. There's 4 levels per world, so you're still going to have to acquire a significant chunk of them across the entire collection in order to unlock that final one. Spoiler, I did not in fact have the time and or patience to deal with doing that, because as it happens, Moonchild is a platformer by sickos for sickos. Sure, it starts innocently enough, eases you into the pace of things as any good platformer should. First 2 levels are downright reasonable. Beyond that, however, that's where the gloves officially come off, and that little heart in the lower left-hand corner that you may not really have been paying much attention to up until now will start to feel very precious to you, especially the number of them that you have left. The heart can be depleted in a number of ways. Grazing enemies and other objects will partially deplete the heart. Landing on other harder obstacles, however, will straight up just obliterate you. And unfortunately, there's just some setups or obstacles that you either won't be able to prepare for or just even see coming first time round. This all quadruples down in the 4th level of any given world here in Moonchild, where you realize that this is expressly designed to screw with you. As well it should, it's a final level, but even for me, the level of screwing around here sometimes gets a little too much. 4th level of the first world, for example, has this invisible platform set up towards the end. That is, after having to do a leap of faith spike jump. And then there's World 2, which, if you take Moonchild as a whole, I would probably vote most likely the world to cause me a brain aneurysm. Because it's not even the last level. It's the third level that almost broke me on my first playthrough. It's got a vibe akin to Getting Over It with Ben and Foddy. This endless ascent with countless ways to just slip and fall, and straight up sections that just actively troll you. This section with the girders here is replete with invisible floors that you can fall through, routes that you need to kind of tease out, and an infinite loop that, if you're not sure what you're doing, will drive you honestly insane. And then, the truthful way out has this almost endless seeming drop that's just long enough to make you think that you've broken something and might consider returning to the menu. The thing you gotta remember about this is Moonchild doesn't have a traditional pause button. There's no sub-menu that overlays here. It just shoots you straight back to the actual main menu and erases all of your progress from the level. Yes, that also includes all of the gems that you'd collected in that level so far. The amount of times that I did that is greater than 1, and let's just say, my blood pressure has not come down since. But this is just an aperitif, a teaser if you will, for the true horror that awaits you in the 4th level of World 2, that being Platform Hell. It really combines a lot of frustrating aspects that the developer was well aware of, and utilizes them to the maximum annoyance of the player. For example, the platforms here don't actually have friction. You will slide off from them if you don't keep up with the movements. This, on its own, is fairly challenging to deal with, but what happens with Moonchild is they've decided to apparently make the platform sentient and also hate you, because they'll do strange movements, sequences, that you won't be able to quite memorize until you've observed them a fair few times. And heck, just a moment of outright straight-up trolling, where the platform actually reverses a little bit, just to screw over anyone that's a little too eager and standing too close to the front edge of the platform. Good grief. Did I mention the entire place is covered in spikes? I hope the developer stubs a toe. For eternity. This is bullshit. You know what I can't fault Moonchild for, though? Variety. It never wants to stay safe. It doesn't want a setup to ever get too familiar, so it's always throwing in new mixes, new combinations, and just new little ways of having to attack things, even sometimes mid-level. There'll be like a scrolling section that suddenly starts challenging you to keep up with the screen lest your character gets crushed, and nowhere is this restlessness better felt than what happens when you transition into World 3, because suddenly jetpack, guess what? You're gonna have to deal with an entirely new way of navigating these levels. Sometimes you'll be able to shoot, sometimes you won't. There's a whole new suite of obstacles and things, and God, have you seen the reverse parallax going on in the background here? It's just like instant sensory overload. And yeah, I know. I've seen what's waiting for me in World 4, and you know what? I'm not feeling very enthusiastic about it. All that said, I'd wager that the jetpack levels here in Moonchild are probably my favorites. An honestly welcome change after the nail-biting platforming tension of the preceding world. Not to say that this is a breeze. I mean, there's seriously some sections here that had me wanting to tear what's left of my hair out, but the pacing was just a hell of a lot more forgiving. The second level, if I'm not mistaken, is almost entirely devoid of enemies, instead dedicating its runtime to having you solve these sliding block puzzles, which are essential when it comes to 100%ing it in terms of gems. If you're not really too interested in that, you can squeeze on by relatively swiftly, but really, you're only hastening your approach into the hellish jaws of the third level, which I feel like is a level designed for the advent of the turbo button on a controller, because you're gonna have to kill a lot of enemies here in order to get a gem out of them, and then later on there's some enemies that you need to subdue with your ability to shoot them so you can pass by them safely. One of them is just so completely cracked out that I was convinced that the game didn't actually have an ending and they wanted you to quit right here. But no, it's doable. It just requires a level of button mashing that I'm not sure this aging frame is equipped to handle anymore. As far as penultimate gauntlet levels go though, you know, I can't complain too much. A lot of hair-raising moments were just about squeaked on by. This sequence of object dodging right here though is a classic example of something that just goes on ever so slightly too long and you just desperately want it to end. See what I mean? It's still going. The final level of World 4 here kind of bucks the trend. I was expecting an absolute no-holds-barred ball-breaker, but no, it's got a much slower pace than I would have expected. It just requires a lot of focus. it traps you for the large majority of its runtime in this labyrinth. There are so many dead ends, and the problem with this one is if you want all of those gems, you are going to have to practically explore the entire thing. The other kicker is that wandering this are these little robot fellas that trace the edges of the maze, so, they're always fun to deal with, before ultimately depositing yourself out in this kind of rocket alley type situation. You gotta guide the rockets to get through some of the obstacles and to get some of these extra gems. And the boss, because there's bosses, is largely an exercise in avoiding it, trying not to go cross-eyed, and making sure you land your shots. It's, again, very much a level that just really needs you to focus down into the minutiae of your movement. But to swiftly walk back to that bomb I dropped in the preceding sentence, yes, Moonchild does in fact have boss encounters at the end of each of its worlds. Not that you'd know, because Moonchild kinda does a terrible job of announcing them with any kind of pomp or circumstance. They're just there at the end of the level, and you're tasked to deal with them. To its credit, no two bosses are the same during the course of Moonchild. It's just that at the same time, they're not all that particularly exciting. The first one was some kind of plant monster that I had to deal with, although I wasn't entirely sure I was doing it right because it just kept getting bigger and bigger until it exploded. That could be read into in a number of ways, I'm sure. Whereas the World 2 boss has you grappling with a completely new mechanic involving these little walking bombs and these magnets, which you can switch the polarity of in order to direct them into these little troughs. Get them all, and the whole thing blows up. Job done. World 3, as I've already mentioned, is just a case of keeping you cool, making sure you don't bump into stuff, and eventually you'll come out A-okay. Again, nothing really momentous to these bosses in any regard. It leaves me pining for the likes of Sonic the Hedgehog, of which I can actually find a fair few parallels. I mean, movement for one in Moonchild feels very derived from that kind of momentum-based movement of classic Sonic the Hedgehog. You don't stop dead as soon as you stop pressing a direction, you do have a little bit of travel, which can make things interesting while you're platforming. And then, well, that's about it. There's sometimes some speed, but like once or twice. And the bosses in Sonic, holy moly, are they handled a hell of a lot better. In all honesty, I'm not really surprised that Moonchild has been kind of languishing in obscurity all these years. I mean, this particular version of Moonchild for Windows came out in 1997. By that point, all three classic Sonic games had been out. In fact, 1997 was the same year that Sonic 3 came to Windows. So yeah, very much not Moonchild's year, but that said, here we are almost a decade later in the year of the Moonchild. It's been rediscovered, it's been unearthed, and many people, including myself, are now discovering its own peculiar joys. I say, that soundtrack is the first step, and the rest of it is a ride unto itself. You're probably wondering why I'm not talking about World 4. Do I need to play the footage again? But yes, reaching World 4 requires 77 gems, and that requires doing practically pitch-perfect runs of every level. Now that wouldn't be so bad. I mean, revisiting levels isn't a cardinal sin or anything if you want to 100% a game, but again, as I've already mentioned, hitting the pause button by accident, as I'm prone to do every now and again, will back you out of a level and erase all of your gem progress for that level. Mercifully, there is an option for people such as myself that no longer have the sheer willpower and grit to grind through such ordeals, and that is the cheat code, which is quite literally cheat. You go into the keys menu here to bind them, and you type out cheat using the keyboard, any other direction for the final option, and there you go, boom! You got it all the gems, all the health, and unfettered access to World 4. Now, I know some of you may doubt my gaming cred for having gone down this route, but you gotta consider I'm no spring chicken, I gotta take care of my health. And I can only imagine how many blood vessels would have exploded if I was trying to do this while taking care of those 3 precious hearts on the lower left-hand corner. Now, while World 4 may look like a swirling psychedelic nightmare or the final boss of epilepsy, it belies a design that is actually kind of straightforward. And if you spend enough time to, stop and observe what's happening in front of you, squint through the psychedelia, you'll find that the path forward isn't that too hard to divine. I will say this section can go to heck, though. Can absolutely do without the screen wigging out all over the place. And don't get me started on these platforms that do like a split vision thing. Feels like it was designed by an optometrist with an axe to grind. But mercifully, once you're through all that, you do land yourself in the arena of the final boss, a sphere containing a heart where you need to spend those gems or diamonds that you've been diligently collecting during the course of this by flinging it in its general direction. The arc of the throw is kind of weird. And for something that you're only ever allowed to do at this point, it would be nice to get a little practice in beforehand, because you feel like a few of these get wasted. And I'm not sure that I ever knew exactly whether I was doing the right thing up until I spent my last gem. But lo and behold, the evil has been defeated, and this utopian planet can be returned to its natural state, and I'm guessing Moonchild is going to have some well-deserved rest. But yeah, there you go. That's Moonchild for you. I'm glad that it still exists. I'm happy that there was a dedicated enough little community behind this over the years to preserve it, to make sure that people decades later, such as myself, can rediscover it and play it and suffer all the same. And ultimately, it's a fascinating time capsule with regards to platformers, game design in general, and assuredly, the music. If Moonchild is going to have a legacy that endures even further into the future, you can bet it's going to be that theme tune, and I can think of no better way to play this video out. Anyway, I'm also going to go have a rest now. This video took entirely too long for me to make, thanks to suffering from some kind of throat ailment that makes me feel like I'm coughing up a lung every now and again. So yeah, I'd appreciate if you liked, commented, subscribed, shared it to anyone else who's interested. But until next time, this has been Mr. Icarus. Thank you very much for watching. Icarus out.